Hi folks, welcome to the Imminent to Midnite Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me on the show today I have Jamie Walden in Colorado. And Jamie, it's really good to have you back. Your last video, last show you did with me was very popular.
Well, yeah, awesome, brother. Good. Yeah, there's a lot of prescient information, bombarding us daily right now. So it is a pretty difficult task to be able to try to rightly disseminate it and give proper analysis in a way that isn't hyperbolic or misleading in any way. So yeah, there's definitely more than enough to talk about to keep those with ears to hear abreast of what's going on.
Yes, that's right. And obviously noticed the whole Hunter Biden pardon thing with Joe Biden pardoning his son. I mean, that doesn't look too good, really. Not that I wanted us to necessarily start off there, but yeah, with Joe Biden, of course, also authorized the Ukraine to use long-range missiles that can target Russia, and that's brought a whole other, can of worms as far as us moving towards a potentially world war.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about it on a macro geopolitical scale, is basically, I'll just use the U.S. instead of saying NATO, because everybody knows NATO is the United States of America, right? So I'll just use the U.S. And ultimately, what we have right now is just a very definitive delineation of East versus West. I mean, that's like, to sum it all up, is it's East versus West for ultimately who is going to rule and reign and hold the keys of power on the restructuring of the entire global political system. So, for a long time, it's been unipolar, as in the United States being the singular sole superpower. But what we have going on in real time is this huge kind of earth-shattering movement, a distinguishing of what can only be described as more of a multipolar type of world, where you have peer-to-peer or near-peer adversaries at a top-tier geopolitical level. But the thing for the listeners to understand is that this isn't like a nuanced thing, as if there's full on legitimate competition for power. It's a feint maneuver, right? It's smoke and mirrors. It has to do with the tactical asymmetric type hybrid warfare on this big sphere, this very big optics sphere through mainstream media and even alternative media platforms, and the visuals and the sound bites and the podcasters and the YouTubers and everything in between, the legacy media, to get the proper optics that they need to usher us into the end state, right? Most of your listeners, Tony, would be familiar with the Hegelian dialectic. It's way over abused by a lot of the talking heads out there in media, but the Hegelian dialectic is very relevant, especially what's going on right now with this imminency of World War III. That they've created the problem, they're managing the reactions to the problem, and then they're going to use that global conflagration to bring about their predetermined, desired outcome, the solution that they want. So even with, if you notice, Tony, with the initiation of the long-term missile strikes into Russia proper, so the sovereign territory of Russia, which, by the way, is a 100% declaration of war. There is no way to massage the language. It is a 100% global declaration of war to initiate the green light, the long-range missiles being shot into Russia. But if you've noticed, President-elect Trump and his appointees up to this point, we have not heard one criticism or one condemnation about the Biden administration creating chaos for the onboarding Trump administration by the initiation of these hostilities against Russia. So what does that tell me? That tells me that everything is exactly as it's supposed to be. That's what it tells me. It tells me that Trump is the guy for the hour, pre-selected, predetermined to be a unifying powerhouse president with a strong command and control presence to reinitiate a counterfeit, rah-rah Americana heartstring appeal to patriotism, classical Americana patriotism. and also to be the strong commander in chief that's necessary to rally the support of the command and general staff of our armed forces in order to follow him into what will only be deemed as World War III when it's all said and done. And also to that point is what will be ultimately spun as a counterfeit Armageddon. That's where all this is going. On the macro scale, what is about ready to be initiated on a global scale is going to be spun as if it was the Battle of Armageddon, which it's not, right? The Battle of Armageddon occurs at the end of the millennial reign of Christ, but it'll be spun that way so that the man of perdition, which by the way is Apollo, it's actually the translation, man of perdition is actually Apollo or Apollyon, right? Elsewhere in Hebrew, also referenced as Abaddon, that this war will be spun as if it was the Battle of Armageddon so that there can be a implementation of what can only be described as a centralized one world singular ruling entity out from Jerusalem with a singular unified kind of hyper spiritual amalgamation of the Abrahamic religions, of the monotheistic religions out from Jerusalem, along with a re-implementation of a global economic status quo because of the resultant economic collapse that will happen with World War III that will be based out of Jerusalem. So that's where all this is going. And even Trump's acquiescence or his silence or whatever fun adjective we want to use to describe what's going on here with the provocation of Russia is very telling about what comes next. The U.S. has systematically, intentionally, deliberately, with high optics, crossed every single red line that Russia or the Axis will say has put in place for a very particular reason, because they must have a limited nuclear exchange with the East. West must have a limited nuclear exchange with the East to accomplish what ultimately they want to accomplish. And right now, what the U.S. has strategically done is actually cordoned and controlled all the Russia proper, even with what's going on in Syria, with Aleppo, the deepwater port that's in Tartus, which is Russia's only deepwater port with access to greater navigable waters and maritime, lanes and stuff like that, is out from Syria. Other than that, Russia's pretty much landlocked and doesn't have a lot of access to project power with their navy. And so even that is part and parcel to what's going on with Russia. And what the U.S. has done is strategically eliminate every single possible option that Russia has to fight conventionally with maneuver warfare or combined arms-based warfare through conventional means. By conventional means, I mean like artillery, tanks, weapons, dumb bombs being dropped from aircraft. What we think of as classical warfare material. The U.S. has strategically removed every single one of those options from Russia so that their only option is a preemptive first strike, which is nuclear in nature. So much so that the U.S. has gone to the point of destroying two of Russia's primary over-the-horizon radar systems specifically to detect incoming nuclear missiles from the West. And we've eliminated those as well, too. So that literally Russia, for lack of a better word, is blind, deaf, and dumb to any incoming missiles. We've eliminated all their stockpiles. We've eliminated the vast majority of their main battle tanks and their IFVs and APCs. We've eliminated just about everything. We've fomented through sabotage and infiltration, civil war and civil strife with inside Russia. We've done tactical decapitations of all their primary leadership. A lot of their other leadership we've compromised by paying them off, which is a de facto tactical decapitation. And we've basically, and we've made the ruble go into free fall collapse, which we saw this week by our sanctions and our economic warfare. All this is to back the Russian bear into a corner to force them to have to use their last means, their last resort that they have, which is some form of a nuclear weapon or other type of asymmetric weapon that then can give the U.S. justification for full bore kinetic exchange with the East. So that's why all this is pretty relevant to what's going on right now. And Trump was selected and put into power to be the guy that walks it out. And also to be the guy that walks out a global economic collapse is predetermined to happen on his watch, because he is the guy that is the art of the deal with the Middle East, the art of the deal with the East, the art of the deal with global economic crises, to actually bring online everything that has been foretold and forewarned through a biblical worldview, a prophetic biblical worldview. So that's where we're at right now, Tony, in a nutshell.
It's interesting too, because I have noticed that the latest call now is that they should put peacekeeping troops, NATO should put peacekeeping troops in the Ukraine, which is, of course, exactly what this whole war started with Russia saying no to having the Ukraine join NATO. And so now they're talking about putting peacekeepers in there, which was, of course, that's just nonsense. But I believe Trump is basically saying the same thing. So that is another thing that'll push Russia into a corner.
Absolutely. It's a doctrine of encirclement is really what's going on here. And it's a done deal, so you have the inception of like Sweden and Finland and Estonia and some of these other countries, Lithuania, these Balkan nations, into NATO, which is a red line that was crossed. We have them talking about giving Ukraine the ability to house nuclear weapons. That's a red line. The tanks were a red line. The long-range missiles was a red line. Every single aspect of a red line has been strategically crossed. That's always been the play. And it's interesting, Tony, that you started out mentioning the pardon of Hunter Biden. The pardon of Hunter Biden isn't a pardon of Hunter Biden. It's a pardon of Joe Biden. That's what most people need to know and understand, because in a de facto sense, by pardoning his son, he's actually sought through tertiary means to pardon himself, because everything relatable to Hunter Biden goes in and out of Ukraine proper. That includes the upwards of 24 bioweapons labs and the creation of a global pandemic being birthed out of there with the gain of function research. And also it is the center of all global child sex trafficking runs through Ukraine. Ukraine has for a decade plus been listed as the most corrupt nation on the face of the earth. That's specifically why all the global elite, in particular the DC elite, Washington DC elite, operate out from Ukraine, because they can with the impunity because of how corrupt the leadership was there. And that even goes into the CIA, intelligence overthrow of a democratically elected president. I believe it was I might be getting my names confused, but Poroshenko, and then installing what is now, through multiple different processes, what is ultimately Zelensky, to carry out these actions against Russia. And it's completely interlinked globally. So when we're talking about Russia and Ukraine, that includes Syria and Lebanon and Iran and the different proxy groups operating in Iraq, Yemen, and Oman, aspects of what's going on with Saudi Arabia, and it's directly connected to China and the Belt and Road Initiative and what they're trying to do with that. It's directly related to Taiwan. We have aerial incursions into the airspace, the sovereign airspace of Japan, and then the U.S. saying that they're going to start housing nuclear weapons in Japan, which is a direct threat to Russia and China over there. And then it goes down into Central and South America with Peru, as in the last couple weeks, basically becoming a de facto proxy state of China, along with Venezuela and Brazil and several other South American countries. And then you move up through Central America to Mexico being, again, de facto. It's always de facto. Nothing's overtly spoken to, but becoming a proxy of China as well, too, which is a proxy of Russia. So we literally have a global World War III in real time. Almost virtually every nation in the world is embroiled in it in some way. But because it does not look like the grinding mechanized maneuver warfare action of World War II, the general populace is blind, deaf, and dumb to what's going on. And that's why they won't understand what in their mind's eye will be an instantaneous escalation, as in nuclear exchange or mega infrastructure collapse through cybernetics or cyber warfare based stuff. However it's manifest, there's all kinds of different plays on the table, but the general populace will be shocked to where their hearts fail them for fear of what they see taking place, because they don't understand this modern warfare of asymmetric hybrid cybernetic based warfare that has been ongoing for really the last decade, but in particular the last 3 years. And then they're going to be shocked overnight when there's cities burning and they won't know where it came from, how it happened, and how could we ever arrive at that point. But the reality is it's going on in real time in our faces, and just nobody cares. So it's a done deal. There's no walking back. All these false prophets, we'll call them, of revival or reprieve, or Trump being this art of the deal guy that's going to usher in peace, and all these aspects of it. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's a feint maneuver. And whatever little bit of counterfeit type of peace or restraint, tactical restraint, we'll say, that Trump thinks he's going to usher in, is only because it's a part of a bigger deception. Remember, it says when they're saying peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon the inhabitants of the earth. When they're saying that, when they're going like, oh my goodness, we're at the brink of World War III, but oh, thank goodness that Trump came into office and was able to maneuver and pacify some of these different global leaders. They're going to be saying peace and security, and then the whole thing's going to fall apart in an instant, and they're going to take us to where they've always been planning the whole time, which is a restructuring of the long-standing oligarch-based world order. It will be restructured overnight.
Well, what about the people that are seeming like in the West, and that you see some people that are almost idolizing Putin, putting him up on some sort of a pedestal as if he's a great bastion of fighting for Christianity and so on, which is completely not right. So,
No.
But Putin himself was from Klaus Schwab's, the forerunner of the young global leaders.
Yes. And so this, again, that's a great point, and that's what people need to understand. So not only is Putin a graduate or an understudy of the Young Global Leader Forum, but so is a vast majority of the Trump appointees. Yeah. So again, that's what we're saying, is people need to understand that they're taking us somewhere. There is quasi agreement. Although a house divided is always going to, there's always going to be infighting. There's not going to be fullness of unity, but there is a quasi, I use that word very particular. There is a quasi unity in where they're taking all this. And what most people don't understand is Russia is amid a populist uprising, where basically the long holdover oligarch-based communistic control mechanisms are about ready to completely disappear forever. China is amid a radical populist uprising, where they're completely the younger class and the business class is categorically rejecting all things CCP and communistic base. Iran is amid the largest populist uprising in their history, with approximately 70% of their population being under the age of 35, and they're categorically rejecting theocratic rulership in Iran. They do not want an ayatollah. They do not want this theocracy ruling and reigning and suppressing their lives. And then you have the U.S. that has the same problem. There is a fervor of a populist uprising to throw off what we call the deep state, or again, the oligarch, fascist-based oligarch system of this ruling class in America. And then you have that in some of the lesser countries. I don't say lesser as a derogatory word, but just less, like GDP and power and influence on the geopolitical sphere. They're all having the same thing. And all of their economies are in free fall collapse. So everybody is in agreement for what comes next. They must have World War III and the Great Reset. There is a unified agreement in that by all the ruling class in all these different nations, regardless of their cultures or their language or their historical differences. They're all in agreement that this thing has to occur now. now, right now, because the whole thing's coming down. And then there's other layers of achievement that they get out of that. Some of it has to do with Apophis and what's going on with that and their need for depopulation. Some of it's economic restructuring. Some of it has to do with, energy and energy reserves and energy rights. Some of it has to do with just a straight up feint maneuver to bring everybody online to a whole new way of kind of a control mechanism on an industrial scale through the advent and implementation of new technologies that really haven't fully been brought online yet, but they're about ready to. So that's why all this stuff is so gnarly. It's so interconnected that most people can't really put it all together. And that's why even domestically in the United States, I'm not privy to what you guys have going on domestically in New Zealand, but domestically what we have going on in the United States, it's all gamesmanship. It's gamesmanship to accomplish what they've already set about accomplishing.
Same in New Zealand as well, I believe. So can you elaborate a little bit about Apophis, and also where do you think the whole climate change agenda fits in?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great one. I was just talking to our church about that yesterday. So climate change and all that is part and parcel to Apophis. World War III is part and parcel to Apophis. The AI, Starlink, and then the other associated civilian-based, satellite companies. China has one, Europe has one. They're throwing up things like Starlink as well too. It is all secondary to Apophis. And why it's secondary to Apophis is multi-domain. Really, one is depopulation. They legitimately, this was all their white papers from their Planetary Defense Initiative war game scenarios that they did in 2018 and 2019. They've been doing it ever since. Is that in light of an impending celestial bombardment, we'll call it, right? Kind of like a fractional orbital bombardment that you would get with nuclear weapons. But because of this asteroid, an asteroid and a meteoroid and a meteor and all these things, they're different, right? But this asteroid Apophis, from their findings was that the human chaos factor was the number one most significant thing in all their war game scenario about this impending effects of this asteroid on the Earth.
Is the asteroid an actual asteroid, or is it a construct?
I believe it's an actual asteroid because it's from the Lord, and we have the, biblical prophecy that speaks very plainly about the celestial effects, the astrocatastrophism that comes at the end of the age and all of its effects, from a third of the grass, a third of the trees, a third of the fish, the fomenting of the sea and waves, changing the magnetosphere. It talks about the heat of the sun, this kind of the solar radiation, the disruption of the earth sciences, the crustal plate displacement with all the earthquakes in diverse places, and the volcanism. It speaks to a great mountain of fire being cast on the sea, stars falling from the heavens like figs ripen from a tree, right? It's a third of this, a third of that, a third of this, a third of that. And it's all secondary to what scientifically they describe are the effects of an asteroid impact. And so then when you have these different planetary defense initiative think tanks talking about Apophis and what it's going to do, when you have the kind of the celebrity physicist, astrophysicist, the DeGraves Tyson talking about Apophis and how NASA and the other international space agencies are deliberately lying about the math on Apophis. He said publicly, I believe it was at a lecture at MIT, that it is a 100% impact. And the space agency are saying, no, it's going to be a near miss. It's going to pass between us and the moon. He's saying they're totally lying about the math. I mean, he's saying that publicly. This is like celebrity status astrophysicist, right? Speaking to this. So anyways, what was interesting about all their findings was that the number one threat was the human chaos factor and mobility of humans. So that's where you get COVID. That's where you get the mass die off of that. That's where you get the sterilization of the masses. So there's not a huge reproduction thing backfilling, backfilling the global populace through reproduction. That's where you get the necessity of World War III for a huge 2.5 plus billion kill off very quickly, very efficiently. That's where you get the EVs, the 15-minute cities, the reduction of mobility, the consolidation of supply chains, and international shipping. That's where you get the consolidation of media, so you can control the outflow of information. So that's where you get the cancel culture that arose in the last couple of years. And then that's where you get the Deagle report of 2025. You get the World Economic Forum Great Reset of 2025. You get all of it. You get the Salvador Seed Vault, which they closed the doors on and sealed. And you get the mass wholesale genetic data bank from the PCR test and the 23andMe and genealogy.com and all these things. Every single thing right now on the earth is being consolidated and controlled for what the effects of Apophis and the aftermath of it. That's why it's all related. So the whole green agenda and the climate change agenda is a smokescreen to keep people from understanding what's actually happening on a earth science level because of the effects of Apophis, and ultimately what is the just, righteous judgment of God on the inhabitants of the earth. It's all a feint maneuver. Every single aspect of it is to keep the masses from understanding what's actually happening. The most recent pop culture depiction of it as a predictive programming apparatus is the movie Greenland by Gerard Butler. I suggest everybody go watch it. Go watch it. They're telling you in plain sight. Same thing with the movie from the early 90s, Deep Impact. Same thing. All the governments of the world know that this thing is coming, but they cannot tell the general populace because of the human chaos factor that will result. All industry grinds to a halt. The banking infrastructure collapses. Our power grid infrastructure collapses. Water treatment collapses. Blah, blah. So you need the masses to keep showing up to work and operating business as usual until the very last second where it's too late for them to do anything to protect themselves. That's what's happening in real time. And part of this wholesale, mass intensive depopulation agenda that's been occurring over the last 5 years is because of Apophis. And that includes what's getting ready to happen with World War III.
So when is Apophis supposed to arrive? So I'm thinking back to 2015 to 2017, there was like a ton of predictions about Planet X and, all these same types of things. And it was going to arrive, certain dates in those years. And of course it didn't happen. So when are you saying that Apophis is meant to impact?
Yeah, and it's not me saying it, just it's what the science community is saying, is that it should be visible in the sky in 2025. And that's why if you think about from Deagle report to World Economic Forum to UN, different agendas, the year 2025 has been being used for a long time. There's a reason for that. It has to do with when the general populace will be very well aware of Apophis. Like they can't hide it anymore. So that's why all their agendas, they need it implemented or completed in 2025. So it's in 2025 is when it would be visible. And then 2029 is when, according to, the astrophysicists in their mathematical calculations, that the effects of it would actually impact Earth. And when I say impact, I'm not talking about an extinction level event. There's no such thing as an extinction level event in the scriptures secondary to an asteroid impact, but it will be a third of the Earth that will be highly affected by the impacts. And, by most of the science, the best way they describe it is a bird shot from a shotgun. It'd be like a bird shot of these fragments of this asteroid, and of the debris tail of this asteroid itself. Not Apophis proper, but they have their own kind of like little gravitational type of thing, and they have debris trails of rock and ice and different minerals and things like that from space that are couple million miles wide and hundreds of millions of miles long. And so what it is as the Earth is rotating on its axis, and its axial tilt, and as it's rotating, there is a particular, this is their work, this is secular scientific community. They say 1/3 of the Earth, as it's on its axial rotation, will go through this debris trail of Apophis, and it will be that whatever 1/3 of the Earth is on rotation at that time, it'll be like it's getting shot with birdshot from a shotgun. So it's interesting that that's exactly what the scriptures have told us. That a third of all these things, a third of the earth, a third of the trees, a third of the grass, a third of the waters, a third of the fish and sea, a third of the ships, a third of everything gets obliterated by what looks like balls of fire raining down from heaven and impacting the earth all over the place at the same time. I mean, not all over the earth, but all over that third of the earth at the same time. So the science is affirming what the Bible's already told us.
So what about people that are saying already that there are mirrors in space and various other cloaking things to try and hide this incoming asteroid? Do you believe there's any truth in that?
I find that a little bit far-fetched, but it's one of those things like, who knows? I don't think they're worried about hiding it. They're not. They've been preparing for a long time. They've been preparing. I mean, you even think, like, I look at everything from a biblical worldview. It says they'll hide themselves in the rocks. Yeah. And I think about all the deep underground military bases. And Obadiah says, though you set your nest among the stars, I'll bring you down low for judgment. They're trying to do off-earth arcs. This is Elon Musk and a lot of the other tech titans out there. They're actively been talking about trying to get off Earth. Then they're talking about trying to get inside the Earth. You have these reports from Zuckerberg to Oprah to everywhere in between, to Bill Gates running to New Zealand, and again everywhere in between. They are getting themselves. They have been getting themselves ready for the last 30 years, and really, I think it goes all the way back to President Ronald Reagan's address to the UN General Assembly in 1987. That's when they locked onto this thing. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, but I often wonder how quickly all of our grievances would go away if we were all facing a unified existential threat from outer space. Like he made that statement. That was like the announcement. Hey, gents, we locked onto this thing. Start getting your crap ready. So if you think about it, that explains even modern monetary theory, where they spin into oblivion because they know it's all coming to an end. They don't care. This even gets into the borders, the border reductionism, and this huge mass migration immigrant influx in the West. And it's about genetic viability is what they're trying to create, because they know the mass die-off that's coming. But so they want to do a controlled die-off first, so then they can manage the effects of the kill off that's going to happen from the asteroid. There's actually, believe it or not, most listeners won't understand this, but the majority of the global elite, although they're Luciferian, we get it, right? They're satanic, whatever, but they are so delusional, they actually believe they're altruistic. I read what they write, I read their papers, I read their articles. They actually believe that they are serving humanity in an altruistic, benefactor-based way to protect the viability of humanity after a mass die-off. They believe that. So they believe that it's their role and their divine right to play God, to manage who's born, who's not born, who's this, who's that, blah, 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 and to like kill off this population, sterilize this population, reduce the gene pool of this population. They're playing God, but they're so delusional. It's through the lens that they're actually altruistic because of what's coming with Apophis. That's what most people don't understand. They're delusional. And they think it's the divine right of the kings, the divine right of the gods to do this thing for the future viability of the human species.
Yeah, I agree that that's the attitude amongst them. But there's one more thing I would like to ask you when you mentioned the migration and immigration and things, I was thinking about Trump's stance that he's going to remove all the illegal immigrants out of America. I mean, if there's 20 or 30 million of them, what happens if they don't all decide they want to go peacefully? How how are they going to remove 20 or 30 million illegal immigrants, or is that going to lead to war within the United States? And, families of some of those people.
I think it's the opposite. It's actually, again, it is a very tactical decision to mobilize, activate, and deploy troops and other strategic assets throughout the continental United States because of World War III and Apophis, because they go together. World War III and Apophis are intrinsically linked. They're symbiotic. They can't be divorced from one another. So I believe that all this rhetoric about the quote unquote rounding up of illegals is, again, a smokescreen justification for a quiet, passive mobilization of assets inside the continental United States for what comes next.
Right. And I mean, potentially having camps or something set up that they can intern people as well.
Just troops. I mean, you think about troops and the law enforcement apparatus and the movement of trucks and material and goods and food and medical supplies and blah, blah, blah. Like, you can't just move those assets around America without Americans freaking out. Yeah. Like, we're very sensitive to our government moving, military material around the nation without a justification for it. So it's a counterfeit light. So it looks altruistic, right? We're going to restore America. Yeah. We're going to make America great again. We don't mind immigration. We just want to deal with illegal immigration. So in order to deal with illegal immigration, we're going to mobilize our National Guards, and then we're going to mobilize different aspects of our active duty personnel and our inactive ready reserves and our reservists. And then we're also going to mobilize different aspects of humanitarian-based federal agencies from DHS, which is a huge umbrella. There's so many agencies that fall under DHS, FEMA being one of them. And then you also get the ability to do a de facto federalization of law enforcement. So they kind of get deputized, for lack of a better word, deputized into being an asset of the federal government for this very altruistic pursuit of making America great again and restoring economic prowess on the public sphere by eliminating, these 30, 40 million people from the workforce that are operating illegally and not paying taxes and not blah, blah, blah. So you can see how the nature of deception is it's actually pretty easy. It really is easy. You don't have to have a very high level Chinese checkers 4D chess type of moves on the board. You can operate out from a chutes and ladder mentality and still accomplish your deception. It's pretty simple.
So have you got anything else you want to bring out before we finish?
Not in particular, because I'll just end up talking forever. But it's going to be very telling. The next 12 to 18 months is going to be very telling. And what's very telling is for the listeners to pay very close attention to all the Trump appointees. And it's not saying they're all going to get approved. Just because they got appointed doesn't mean that they're going to get approved. But they all have a uniquely unified worldview of hyper-political Zionism and intensive hawkishness towards the East, Russia and China in particular. And again, all this is because they're taking us somewhere. There's no way around it. And Trump is the man of the hour. He was selected. He was picked. He is the guy to accomplish what comes next, both in the Middle East and in Europe and domestically. He's the guy of the hour.
Yeah, I totally agree that he was selected for it. Absolutely. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people that see him as the answer already, and he's not even there. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. And the whole thing with Biden too, of course, now, with this whole pardon thing, it stops people opening up a can of worms with other aspects of the corruption in the Biden administration too. Because since Hunter Biden's not something they can pick on anymore, It's very convenient.
Yep, everything's very convenient. It's very convenient how easily there was this transition to the Trump administration. That uncannily convenient. Where's the pallets of bricks? Where's the Antifa? Where's the BLM? Where's the LGBT? Where's the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protest? Where's every freak show reprobate that's tried to burn down our cities and brick little old white ladies in the back of their head? Where are they at now? Like now of all times is when they should be, setting our cities ablaze and all the liberal urban centers, and yet there's not a word. It's because it's all controlled. It's always been controlled. There hasn't been an organic move of civil disobedience in the United States of America since the 50s. There hasn't been an organic move. It's all part and parcel and controlled and funded and undergirded and, told when to turn it off by the intelligence apparatus was inside the United States of America. So the fact that Trump just kind of so handily wins the election and then just walks on into power with not a peep or a squeak from anybody other than those harpies at the View is very telling that he's the guy. He is the guy.
Yeah.
That was foreknown to do exactly what comes next.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. Okay. Well, thanks, Jamie. Now, where do people find you online?
Yeah, they can find me under Jamie Walden just on YouTube and also on Rumble if they want to subscribe there and follow the different aspects of content that we put out there. And then also if they want to get a hold of me, they can do it through omegadynamics.org.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show again today. And it'll be fascinating to hear people's comments. I'm sure there'll be a wide range of different ones. But folks, if you could remember to like the video and share it, that'll be, or whether you're listening to it on audio or video, that would be great. So yeah, it's been awesome, Jamie. Thank you for being back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate you having me on.
Cheers.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. And folks, remember also our website is imminentemidnight.com. Please make sure you subscribe to us down the right-hand side of the page where it says subscribe to blog. And we do run A Minute to Midnight 100% by donations. Thank you to the folks that do help us out through donating. If anyone else wants to help by donating, you can do that at aminutetomidnight.com. There is a donations page with any questions you might have on there. And as I say, it's always much appreciated. And the music used, I've written, played and recorded. God bless, and God willing, we'll be back in a few days with another episode.